It wouldn't be me. I'd have trouble passing the start line.
Coming up on Videogame Nation.
Pump up your Air Jordans and put on that U2 album where they tried doing techno that one time. Dan, Aoife and I are hitting the late 90s and climbing into the 10 games that define the last of the great console cartridges, the Nintendo 64.
That's this week on Videogame Nation. Hello television friends, high def, high five. Welcome to part 3 of our 4-part retrospective on classic consoles that defined eras in gaming, where we count down 10 games that made each of those systems the beasts they were. Today we're going to go from 1996 to the early 2000s, a simpler time when Marilyn Manson told the world that he was the Antichrist. He was, of course, wrong, as Justin Bieber had been born in 1994. And today, the console that we're going to cover is the Nintendo 64.
The 64 was the last great cartridge-based console, the first time gamers ever saw a controller they couldn't understand, and the last time Nintendo brought out a system that could be described in any way as powerful.
Now, everyone's got a story about their old machines, and my mum bought me my Nintendo 64 as a reward for going on school camp in grade 9. And now, 17 years later, I'd like to say thank you, Mum. School camp was horrible, but the 64 made it all worth it. And to be fair, I should probably just ring you, as you don't watch this show.
Debuting in Japan in June 1996, the N64 was built to smash the Sony PlayStation's dominance over the gaming market.
In fact, I chose the 64 as a direct response to the PlayStation because this is a 32-bit system, but this is a 64-bit system. Why? That must mean it's twice as good. It's simple marketing, but when simple marketing hits a simple person, that's a sale. And by God, there are a lot of us.
As well, there should have been. The 64 had software giant Rare working exclusively on games for the platform, and the Nintendo Rare partnership birthed some of the most well-respected games of the era.
And all that started with the first time a little plumber talked.
You know those annoying people who can just pick up something you've been trying to master forever and they're just immediately good at it, and you just look on at them in awe and think to yourself, why should anyone else even bother? Yeah, that's what Nintendo did with 3D platforming.
Super Mario 64 is a game so good, Nintendo designed the N64's controller around it. It's a game that has, in many ways, never been bettered. Big words, I know, but bear with me.
Mario 64 was a game burdened by responsibility. It had to build on the legacy of 5 incredible 2D Mario games. It had to convince people that the heavily delayed Nintendo 64 was still worth buying in a post-PlayStation age, and it had to teach people the joys of analog movements in a 3D space. That it managed to do all of that is nothing short of miraculous.
The boldest thing Mario 64 does is rip up the rulebook established by its makers. Look beyond the familiar characters and you'll see that it's really nothing like any of the other Mario games. Nintendo looked at 3D as a chance to liberate Mario from his 2D confines, and that sense of joyful liberation defines the entire experience.
Take Princess Peach's castle, for example. Before Mario 64, games didn't really have hub areas, and even though so many of them do now, none of them seem to understand why quite like Nintendo.
The main hub area in Mario 64 is a massive, evolving playground that allows you to safely experiment with Mario's new bag of tricks before setting foot in any of its 15 amazing worlds. It's packed with secrets and clever optical illusions that transform the simple act of selecting a level into an artful, surprising challenge of its own.
That such imagination is applied to what was previously such a functional aspect of game design is indicative of the incredible creativity applied across the board. From its sublimely constructed worlds to its superb dynamic soundtrack, Mario 64 represents Nintendo at the peak of its powers. Right, I'm being told there's 9 other games to get through, so I will shut up now. Here's Mario Kart 64.
Mario Kart was and still is the quintessential, get your friends round and have fun game. When we think back of the games we enjoyed with our friends, Mario Kart 64 is nearly always up there, and for good reason. It's still a great kart racer.
Everyone got Mario Kart 64 for the 4-player versus and a battle mode. Countless nights I've had at my friend's house where we just always be playing first to 10, first to 10. and it would go on for ages. I don't know how Nintendo do it, but they just make incredibly fun games, and Mario Kart 64 is probably one of the funnest games I ever played in my life.
Honestly, the whole 3D thing just ruined Mario for me. That is incorrect. That is not how Mario goes from left to right. That's the correct way Mario goes. Doing it in 3D is like colouring in the White Album.
Mario Kart was so popular because it was wacky races, but it was all about screwing your friends over. And I think it was fun, like all Nintendo games, it just worked. Do you know what I mean? We have so many games now that it's like, oh, you could do this crazy thing, but you don't. It just doesn't work. Mario Kart was like, yes, this feels right, everything's in place, and it was a skill-based racing game where you'd throw banana peels in people's tires and they would hate you for like the rest of the day.
Mario Kart 64 was popular for the same reason that Super Mario 64 was popular. It was a 3D version of Mario that was better than all the amazing Mario we'd had already. It was incredible. The N64 was a brilliant time to love Nintendo, whereas now we get things like Miitomo. I know it's not been out long, but we're already sick of it, aren't we?
Right, I'm saying it now, I hate Mario Kart. I've always hated Mario Kart. I hate every single Mario Kart. If you try to play Mario Kart with me, I will go full GTA on you. And I don't mean in the game. I mean, call the police, son. You just bought yourself a one-way ticket to the world of hurt. And now that I've, once again, come across like a complete psychopath, I've always had a really soft spot in my heart for Diddy Kong Racing.
One Christmas when I was a kid, Diddy Kong Racing was the game they had on display in the shops, and all the kids could go up and play it. Since I was a teenager, I'd wait until no one was looking.
Because I was cool.
And then I'd get a hold of the adorable racing game Rare made. And look, it was just flat out better than Mario Kart. You could do more. The courses change depending on which of the three vehicles you picked. You could be a gorilla on a tiny hovercraft. You could be a little bear in a tiny plane. You could be a squirrel. Wait a minute. That's Conker before he took up the booze. And Banjo before Kazooie.
Yes, this was the game so good that characters from the menu screen got their own spin-offs.
I meant what I said about the Nintendo Rare partnership. Rare was the flagship developer of the 64. Almost everything they made turned to gold, except Blast Core, which turned to critical gold, which is almost the same, but you can't use it to feed your family.
Which is why it's now time to jump from cute critters and itty-bitty cars to the game that was responsible for all your friends coming around the house with their controllers and using up those 3 extra slots. It's the game that turned every single Saturday afternoon into young kids being experts on martinis and the inner workings of a Walt the PPK. Only one man we know uses such a gun. Here's James Bond, GoldenEye 007.
I think GoldenEye on the N64 was the first proper time we had a proper console shooter that we could just all enjoy and everybody knew how to play.
GoldenEye showed that, you know, you can have a really good first-person shooter on a console, and that was pretty unique at the time. And it really saw the fact that, you know, consoles can do this. And it also had not only a very good kind of single player, but of course, you know, the multiplayer that everyone kind of really knows it for now.
Everyone goes on about the multiplayer in GoldenEye, right? But what I liked was the really accurate representation of the main character. Like, especially, do you remember at the beginning when the camera sort of goes along the lift shaft or whatever, and it goes down, and you see like Pierce Brosnan, and he's all like got pointy hair and like this really sort of jaggedy face. And I thought, yes, that is what Pierce Brosnan looks like. This is the most accurate representation of a human being in a video game I've ever seen. Because in real life, Pierce Brosnan looks like he was drawn with a ruler.
It was the first really awesome first-person shooter on consoles. I mean, you go back to it, the controls are shonky as anything these days because they haven't worked out how to do it, but it was a really big deal. That and things like Resident Evil, it was the first time games started to feel grown up.
When you're having the arguments that would happen when you were sort of early teens, which is what is the better games machine, and obviously the answer was PlayStation, but GoldenEye was like, it seemed like a proper game, and you kind of had to accept that that was one of the few things that they had and be like, yeah, right, GoldenEye does look all right, but that's it.
GoldenEye was great because I didn't even like James Bond and I liked GoldenEye. I think people loved it so much because you just felt like James Bond. You had the laser watch and you have to laser the bits off the train. You had the silence pistol that did pew pew little noise when you shoot people. And if you didn't like James Bond, you could be the bad guys and kill James Bond. They were just your friends instead of actually Pierce Brosnan, who is a lame James Bond.
It's amazing to think that at one time it was possible to enhance a console's capabilities by including additional hardware within a game.
The Mega Drive version of Micro Machines 2 ingeniously allowed for 2 extra controllers to be plugged directly into the cartridge, and dozens of Super Nintendo games featured additional chips that boosted performance. By far the most famous of these was the Super FX chip, which provided sufficient added oomph to pump out 3D graphics and was first and most memorably deployed in furry-friendly space shooter Star Fox.
Star Fox's sequel, Star Fox 64, or Star Wings sequel Lilac Wars, if you must, needed no performance-enhancing trickery to achieve its slick visuals, but it's still responsible for a gaming first. Do a barrel roll! No, not that. I'm talking about Rumble.
We're now so acclimatized to our pads vibrating that we often forget it's even there. But at a time when games lacked any tactile feedback, the Rumble pack that came bundled with Star Fox 64 was a revelation. The pack plugged into the N64 controller's expansion port and immediately brought a new dimension to an already excellent game, allowing us to feel every shot and explosion.
But even without its hand-buzzing pleasures, Star Fox 64 is still worthy of inclusion on this list because it's quite simply brilliant at what it does.
Clearly inspired by Outrun, Nintendo cleverly avoided the pitfalls of most on-rails games by including a branching story that was directly affected by the player's performance. Nintendo being Nintendo, each level was utterly unmissable, particularly the free-roaming dogfights, and so replay after replay was assured.
It's taken 20 years for Nintendo to return with a proper sequel in the form of Star Fox Zero for Wii U, which is some indication of just how difficult it's been to produce something that lives up to its mighty legacy. Right, that's all for this half. Join us after the break for Nintendo 60 more. See you in 3.
Why do you have special nipple guards? You're in a car.
Some things are better left undisturbed.
Welcome back. Now, I've been told that my enthusiasm for these N64 games is bordering on unhealthy, so I'm off for a lie down for the rest of the show while these slightly more balanced individuals cover off the 5 remaining games. Next up, F-Zero X. Are you sure you don't need me for the rest of the show? Fine.
I always liked the soundtrack in F-Zero X because it was those sort of rocky guitars, like and like if you look it up, they all have brilliant names. All the tracks, they're all called things like Dream Chaser and like Endless Chase and The Long Distance of Murder, which also coincidentally is the title of a Murder, She Wrote episode. So probably some sort of homage.
You know, it wasn't as graphically pleasing as say something like Wipeout, but you know, F-Zero is I think one of the best races there is. I think kind of taking that and the amount of tracks there was, the amount of cars, things like that, it kind of really hit the nail on the head with that kind of really in-your-face, fast-paced, kind of loud gameplay.
Do you know what? It was the fact that you could have so many different races on screen at once. I think it was like 30 races on the screen. Like before that, it was just 8 max. That's what you could have, 8 people max. This time it was 30, like rah, there's 30 different cars all going at the same time. And it had the X Cup as well. The X Cup was where you'd finish the game, you got a special cup where Nintendo would just make the tracks. It would just randomly generate a track for you, and it would always make a crazy track where the turn was just so sharp that everyone would just fall off the edge.
I think F-Zero X was one of the N64's best races because nobody else really made games for the N64 other than Nintendo. So like the list of companies that made racing games for Nintendo is about as diverse as the list of flavours of Special K.
F-Zero was a solid racer, and it had always been in 2D and it come into 3D, and it meant something. I don't remember any of the characters apart from Captain Falcon, and the main thing is I think he was racing for a reason. I don't know whether it was like his family had been kidnapped or he wanted to be the best, but either way, there was no excuse for having just nipple plates on his costume. It was just like, why do you have special nipple guards? You're in a car. Who's trying to tweak you, man?
Ocarina of Time is one of my favourite games of all time because of one feeling. The first time Link steps out of Kokiri Forest and the Hyrule Field music triumphantly plays as you see this vast expanse of land stretch out before you, waiting to be explored, is an exciting moment. Every time I go back to the game now, I'm shocked by how small Hyrule Field actually is, because playing Ocarina back in the day, it felt vast and limitless. But Ocarina was about more than one location and one mute boy and his horse. It had an amazing cast of diverse and memorable characters, and it differed from other stories I'd experienced at that time in that it featured a world in which the villain actually won. Interestingly, Ocarina of Time actually serves as the tipping point for all Legend of Zelda mythology, and a large majority of the Zelda titles that came before and after it can be charted through one of the 3 supposed scenarios involving Link and whether he was successful in his quest. But it isn't really for that Ocarina is remembered. It's remembered for all the little touches and activities that the player can undertake. Saving the world is great and all, but you really can't beat a spot of fishing. Or if you get bored of that, you can go rare mask hunting, or just hang out with the Zoras and the Gorons. There were so many secrets hidden away in Hyrule that you could just while away hours, collecting gold Skulltula tokens, meeting fairies, finding singing frogs, grabbing hidden heart pieces, or buying up lots of magic beans. There was a richness to this world that really made you feel like anything was possible there, and the music, no matter where you went, was always perfect. I still remember the thrill of winning Epona in a race against the evil Ingo, figuring out that the way to defeat King Dodongo was to lob bomb flowers in his mouth, and the big reveal of who the mysterious Sheik actually was. The dungeons were challenging, of course, and none more frustrating than the infamous Water Temple, though it was made a lot less maddening in the 3DS remake of the game, where players could easily swap their iron boots on and off on the fly. If you've played Ocarina of Time before, I am willing to bet that all this chat about it will have made you itching to play it again. If you haven't played it, well, that's a big bit of gaming history you're missing out on, so in the absence of a magical sword to turn back time and rectify the situation, just get your hands on a post-haste, alright?
Well, the original Super Smash Bros., you had Mario and you had all his mates and they had a fight. That was pretty different at the time because you hadn't seen it. They were all like, again, it was all kids' characters to us, the children that were saying this. It's like kids' characters, but then it's like, no, look at this. Mario's punching Donkey Kong in the face.
I love that Nintendo just went for Super Smash Bros. They were like, let's just get all our sort of best, most popular mascots and just let them beat the out of each other. I think that was quite a bold decision. Like, imagine if Disney were like, oh yeah, let's do a fighting game. Let's have Simba out of The Lion King just decking Snow White. Actually, that'd be brilliant, actually. I'd quite like to beat the living daylights out of Bambi.
Super Smash Bros. Really took, these kind of iconic Nintendo characters and just shoved them in one game, and it really works. Other places have tried to do the same. I kind of got Capcom versus Marvel, things like that, but I think Nintendo just has such a wealth of brilliant characters and, and iconic characters that you can draw upon, that it kind of really works for that. And it's just that kind of really fun brawler, beat 'em up, just the chaos of Super Smash Bros. I think works really well.
Smash Brothers was unique because it took like the items of Power Stone, and then it took like the craziness of Mario Kart, and it combined it. And it wasn't about the violence, it was just about who's the best. Who's the best? That was it. It's not about who's getting beaten up, it's about who's the champ, who's gonna win.
The original Super Smash Bros. Was the most unique fighting game at the time, and it's the best. Maybe not the original one, maybe Melee, but like Smash Bros. Is the greatest fighting franchise, and anybody who says any different is just don't even worry about it. You're unequivocally wrong. It doesn't matter.
For me, the thing that's unique about Smash Brothers is that I love Nintendo, and I've always had Nintendo stuff, and yet I've never got into it. I cannot understand it, I don't enjoy it, and I don't know why it's so popular.
Look, I'll level with you right now and admit that I am not the biggest fan of crossover games. Many feel like developers just mashed universes together that have no business being anywhere near each other. Too many times it stinks of being a cash-in on the part of its makers rather than something for the fans. But Smash Bros. I think is the exception to the rule because, well, it's just so much fun. Anyway, on to our next title, the follow-up to one of the N64's most beloved games.
Perfect Dark was one of the best games on the N64, and I don't know why. I have no idea. It was just GoldenEye, but like made up, and that was it. That was the whole thing. But people were like, "Yep, okay, more, done."
I never really liked Perfect Dark because I thought it was just a bit serious and a bit gloomy, and I think Rare were much better at, you know, making games about sort of giant lunatic monkeys and squirrels and things. Like, those are games I'd just rather play.
I think it's one of the best games on the N64 and probably one of my favourite games of all time because it lived up to the most craziest amount of hype ever. Everybody was in love with GoldenEye. It was the best game, that was it. There was nothing was going to beat it, and then all of a sudden word came out, there's going to be another game made by the same people that made GoldenEye, and it's going to be better. Everyone's like, what? Better than GoldenEye? Shut up! That's not coming out. When it came out, it surpassed everyone's expectations. Just amazing. The fact that it added bots into the multiplayer, you had meat sims and pro sims running around, taking you out. The fact that you could change up all the rules, you can make your own characters and stuff. Had everything in the game that GoldenEye didn't have, and it was like, yeah, well done. Well done, Rare. Well done.
It was GoldenEye 2, wasn't it? I know it didn't have James Bond in it, but Perfect Dark was the sequel to GoldenEye in everything but name, and it is, I mean, arguably, but it is. It's a better game than GoldenEye. And it's weird because, like, people, me included, but a lot of gamers complain, oh, we've never got GoldenEye re-released, but Perfect Dark came out on the Xbox. You can go and play that and it's better. If that's the thing, go and get that.
All right, jabronis, listen up. I'm going to make you humble in the old country way. This is the best wrestling game on the Nintendo 64 and one of the finest wrestling games ever made.
The roster is crammed with characters from the most popular period in grappling history.
This is after Hulk Hogan became your childhood hero and a long time before your childhood hero pinned his best friend's wife for quite significantly longer than a count of 3.
Including favourites like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Mankind, and folks you'll never see again like Chris Benoit. Don't look him up, you'll regret it.
I'll just point out, if you don't like pro wrestling, it doesn't matter you don't like pro wrestling. You might want to go make yourself a sandwich for the next couple of minutes, because I'm not going to lie, I'm a bit keen.
By God, King, this is an absolute slobber knocker of a game. The Creator Wrestler is stacked with features. You can fight in different backstage areas. There's a colossal ladder for all your ladder matching needs, a colossal cage for all your cage matching needs, a shop for shopping. And it has the single best wrestling game engine of all the times, the AKI THQ fight mechanics that make fights really feel like fights. You will battle other people for 20 minutes without even realising you've done it. That's how good this system is.
Yes, the graphics do look a bit ugly, but so do wrestlers most of the time. Shut up.
You'll forget the graphics as soon as you start playing. The character models make moves look impactful. The 2 frames of crowd animation in the background will fall into the background. I'm even prepared to forgive the fact you don't get full wrestler entrances just because you do get little details like Scotty 2 Hotty doing the worm when he and the other guys from Too Cool win a match. It's a fantastic game. With God as my witness, most of the SmackDown vs. Raw series has been broken in half and should have been.
Woo! So ends our special about the Nintendo 64. Do you have any favourite games that we missed? Do you have any stories of your own about Nintendo's weird brick from the future? Well, like the Videogame Nation Facebook page, tweet at us at #VGN and tell us all about it. This has been episode 101 of Videogame Nation and it's been a pleasure. And that's the bottom line, because John Robertson said so.
Tonight at 7:30, these ninjas want to be seen. How else would anyone know they'd won? It's Ninja Warrior, here on Challenge.